Hi, everybody. Hi there, everyone. I'm just getting everything set up right here. Just bear with me one moment while we sort out the technical details. Things are going to be just a little tiny bit choppy, but hopefully we have better image quality, decent sound, and a fairly stable stream. So bear with me while we sort all that out. If anybody's having any issues with the stream, if there's any issues with the sound, with the video, please type something in the comments. You know, we'll see if we can fix that up. But hopefully we should have a pretty stable connection. As always, takes 6 minutes for me to make sure that things are actually working the way they're supposed to work. Pardon me just one moment. Okay. Well, I think that I will officially begin. I trust that everything is going well. Having a little bit of trouble getting video on my monitor here, but that's part of the fun of being a vagabond wine educator. Every live stream tasting, you're in a different place, doing things a little bit differently with different machinery, but hopefully this will go well, and I'm really excited about tonight's event. So I'm sorry. You'll have to forgive me. I'm logging into my own stream on my phone right here so that I can see and make sure that everything is functioning. All right. Welcome everybody to the virtual Vinstitute. This is, I believe, our sixth live stream tasting, and I am particularly excited about tonight for two reasons. One is that we're going to be talking about aromatic white wines, which are some of my personal favorites. And the other reason that I'm particularly excited is because of the location that we're in. I'm not in the tool shed at my parents' home in Qualicum Beach after selling my house in Osoyoos and then moving out to Vancouver Island, where I have no home. No, instead I have been very graciously hosted today at Tainamara Resort, Spa and Conference Center here in beautiful Parksville, just on the eastern coast of Vancouver Island. So what we have right here is a quiet little corner of the main lobby. So you may hear a little bit of sound in the background. That's because they have 2 restaurants here on site, and on Tuesdays and Wednesdays they are offering half-price appetizers. They also do a 2-for-1 takeout pizza. This is a plug for all the locals in the area. 2-for-1 takeout pizza every night of the week at Tainamara. But if you are not familiar with Tainamara, I'll get my sort of grateful plugging out of the way early. They are repeatedly known as the top spa in all of Canada, repeatedly gaining accolades for #1 spa in Western Canada, #1 spa in all of Canada. They have 22 acres of lush verdant woods surrounding the resort and 3 acres of warm sandy beach, where you have in Parksville the warmest ocean water in all of Canada. This is where you have the warmest swimming in the ocean in the entire country, and it's all right here at Tainamara. So they have been kind enough to set me up in their foyer, and without further ado, I will be talking about aromatic white wines. So I say aromatic white wines for a very specific reason. There are white wines upon white wines, right? Within British Columbia, we grow around 80 different grape varietals, and about half of those are white wine grapes. So that's 40 different white wine grapes that we grow just in BC, and it is everything from hybrids that have been specifically designed to endure conditions like the ones that you have out here on Vancouver Island, to kind of pure strain varietals coming over from Europe, things from France, things from Italy, things from Germany. But aromatic whites are a class into themselves. Aromatic whites are very specifically white wines that lead with the nose. That's probably the best way to describe it. They are wines that have exceptionally distinct noses, that have beautiful, sometimes floral, sometimes fruit characteristics, and that really present themselves immediately as soon as you stick your nose in the glass. There are plenty of non-aromatic white wines. A good example is something like Chardonnay. That's a very popular white wine grape that is not particularly aromatic. It has a nice smell, but it doesn't smack you with the aroma in the same way that a proper aromatic would. Wines like Pinot Gris tend to be sort of classified as maybe semi-aromatic, or sometimes classified as aromatic, but they can be more or less in terms of their aroma. But the wines that we're going to be talking about tonight are particularly ones from right on that line between the French and German border, wines that are very popularly planted in the Alsace region of France, which is the area of France that hugs the German border. And there in the Alsace, you see some fantastic wines that have incredibly potent and alluring aromas. So we're looking at 2 of them specifically today. We are looking at everybody's favorite wine to say out loud, Gewürtztraminer, and we are looking at Riesling. People often ask me about the pronunciation of Riesling, and generally speaking, within the Western English-speaking world, we love to say Riesling. Riesling is considered accurate. However, Germans call it Riesling, and they invented the grape. So, honestly, you can say whatever you want. I would say nobody's right, but literally the Germans are right and we are wrong, but we do it anyways. So we have 1 Gewürztraminer and 2 Rieslings that we're going to talk about this evening. And let me just show them off to you here. We're going to be starting with the 2015 Bordertown Gewürztraminer. Very excited about this one right here. It's fun to see any white wine that has a little bit of bottle age, and this one in particular is showing it off very nicely. Then we are going to be moving on to one of my longtime personal favorites, the NK'MIP Cellars. This is their 2019 NK'MIP Riesling. This is hot off the presses. This was so brand new that I had to have the Winery Association send me out a bottle just this past week, because that was the earliest that we could get our hands on it. So this is a brand new product right here, but a habitual favorite. And finally, we are going to be finishing off with a little bit of the 2017 Phantom Creek Estates Riesling. Now, that's of course very exciting, I think, for a lot of people because Phantom Creek is a brand new winery. It's a winery that's had a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement surrounding it, and this may be some people's first glimpse of their wine in person. Not that you're actually in person. I'm in person. You are watching me through a screen, but whatever. It's all make-believe, right? We can just pretend. So, we're going to start with Bordertown. We're going to begin with the 2015 Gewürtztraminer, but before I grab the bottle and occupy my hands, I want to tell you a little bit about Gewürztraminer in general. So, Gewürztraminer is a strange word. It's a great grape, but it's a weird word. Gewürztraminer, it literally translates to the spicy grape from Traminer. But that's confusing for a couple of reasons. Because, number one, the grape is not spicy. It's not spicy at all. And number two, Tramin is a town in Italy. And this is a grape that's grown in Germany and in the Alsace region of France, which is very far away from Italy. So what we have here is a complete lie of a name, Gewürztraminer. Why is it called the spicy grape from Traminer when it's not even anywhere close to Traminer and it isn't spicy? Well, the reason is because grape naming conventions are silly and usually bad. You see, there is a grape called Sauvignon Blanc. Now, you might be thinking I said Sauvignon Blanc, and you might think I know that grape, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Sauvignon Blanc with an I instead of Sauvignon Blanc. It's a different grape. Remember what I said about how grape naming conventions are bad? Well, Sauvignon Blanc comes from Italy. It comes from this little town of Tramin. And so because it's from this area, it was called Traminer as well. When they started to plant this grape in France, where there was an existing Sauvignon Blanc, there was confusion about the names. They decided to stick with the name Traminer. So you have a grape called Sauvignon Blanc, which isn't Sauvignon Blanc. Then they rename it Traminer. That grape mutates. It gives off a different type of grape, basically, that then winds up becoming Gewürztraminer. Almost every grape that we know and that we enjoy has been created as a divergence, as a mutation, as an offshoot of some other grape. Mostly it's old grapes that we have never heard of being turned into new grapes that we know. And in this case, it's exactly that, because who knows what Traminer is. So anyways, Traminer mutates into Gewürztraminer, and they call Gewürztraminer because it is from Traminer. It's from the grape Traminer. And Gewürz means spicy, but it doesn't mean spicy. You see, in Germany, Gewürz, spicy, can be used to imply floral characteristics. It's used as a synonym for smells like perfume, smells like spice. So what it actually means is the perfumed grape that is coming from a grape called Traminer. It's very confusing, and I just blew 4.5 minutes explaining that to you, but I feel like it's necessary because everybody says the name wrong. So I've said Gewürztraminer probably 20-25 times in the last 4 minutes. So you've got that going on at least. You hopefully that'll start to drive into memory. The other thing is that you can explain to people why it's actually named what it is. I remember when I was first learning about the wine industry and getting into it, some very knowledgeable employee at the winery that I was working at said, "You know, Moss, it means the spicy grape from Traminer." And then they just walked away. And I said, "That doesn't make any sense," and nobody ever explained it to me. So now you know why. It's a misleading name, but I guess it's not totally incorrect. Bordertown. Who wants to know about Bordertown? Has anybody ever been to Bordertown? Well, I can't hear you. So this is a fun little winery. It's in a perfect location, very prominent. As soon as you start driving into a Soyuz from any direction, you see Bordertown right at the crossroads when you're heading into a Soyuz. If you're coming down Highway 97, if you're coming in from the Crow's Nest from Vancouver, you will see Bordertown. And Bordertown is a relatively new winery. It was founded in 2015 by Mohan Gill. and his family. He operates it with his brother, and they have about 110 acres of fruit that they farm, and they very proudly produce 14 different grape varietals. Remember when I told you that British Columbia had almost 80 different grape varietals across the entire province? Well, Bordertown, Mohan, he has 14 varietals just in his own vineyards, and that means that they have a tremendous range and a tremendous versatility in terms of what they are able to put into their wines, and they have in fact won some great acclaim for some of their red blends. Their Living Desert Red, which is kind of their signature red blend, it won the Lieutenant Governor's Award of Excellence in Winemaking in the very first year that it was released, which was also the very first full year of operation. They started up in 2015, boom, 2016, they won this incredibly prestigious award for their red blend. So the point is, Bordertown kind of came out strong. They started with just a few thousand cases in production, and then they very quickly grew over the next 5 years to about 13,000 cases of production. And Mo Gill has said in the past that he'd be happy to go up as high as 40,000 cases in production. So they're very vigorous in terms of their production. They really just want to do the work and put in the best quality wine that they can. And in fact, to supplement what they're doing, they have even put out a fantastic cider. They now have, you can buy a 24-pack of their canned cider. Their cider is absolutely delicious. It's a beautiful apple cider, and it's called Hard Pressed, which is a fun name. You can actually even taste the cider at their winery if you go to visit them in person. They are open every day of the week right now. They are operating on kind of a first come, first serve basis. So you don't make a reservation. You just show up. You get into the bar. You taste some wine, and you can try the cider right alongside with it. They are obviously limiting the amount of groups that are in. Maximum 12 people in the winery at a time. Maximum 2 groups of sort of 6 at a time. That sort of idea. But it really is worth a visit to Bordertown to try their amazing award-winning wine and also their cider while you're there. But if you're not going to the winery in person, you can also order it online. They're offering free shipping on any order of wines, 6 bottles or more. So there's really no excuse, is there? All right, now let me see if I can get the crack on mic here. There we go. It's always satisfying, isn't it? Nice label. It's got a B on it. So, 2015 Gewürztraminer, right? Immediately, some people might think, wait a minute, 2015 was 5 years ago. What's going on here? Well, something that, as long as I've been in the wine business, I've been trying to convince people of, and sometimes it's a hard sell, sometimes it's a uphill battle, is that you can get some amazing characteristics from aged white wines. And one of the reasons why we are using this particular wine in this tasting today, there were plenty of Gewürztraminers that we could go to from Oliver and Osoyus, but we chose to go with this because having a little bit of age on the wine gives it such an interesting character that you really can't replicate in a brand new wine. Now, all of that said, they're actually just releasing their 2019 Gewürztraminer right now. It is available at their tasting bar. It isn't even stated on their website yet. You can order it if you contact them directly. They haven't even put in the update yet on the website. It's so brand new, but you can get the 2019 vintage available from the winery right now. But here's the 2015. So one of the things about Gewürztraminer that is notable is its color, and unfortunately you can't really see. Of course, you never really can when I'm doing the tasting on camera right here. But this is a wine that has some color to it. Gewürztraminer grapes are a little bit pink. They're like Pinot Gris. Pinot Gris and Gewürztraminer are 2 white wine grapes that tend to have a bit of pigment, a bit of coloration, and so what happens when you press them, even if you press them very gently, they'll absorb a little bit of pigment, and that means that they'll wind up a little bit golden, a little bit amber. They'll take on a little bit of that coloration in the wine itself. And so Gewürztraminer is, I've heard it described as a great beginner's wine because it is immediately recognizable in a few ways. One is from the color, is that pigment. Even if you have a relatively young vintage, which normally would be fairly clean looking, Gewürztraminer will usually have a little bit of that pigment to it, a little darker. And then the second reason why it is immediately, recognizable is the aroma. This is, as I said, a whole session entirely on aromatic white wines, and this fits the bill. This is aromatic. It's beautiful. Gewürztraminer. Yes, we're gonna get to taste soon, Jennifer. Hold your horses. Gewürztraminer is a wine that tends to have a really, really expressive nose. It has elements of rose petal or rose water sometimes. Particularly in drier versions of it, you tend to get more of that rose coming out. You get citrus, you get melon, you get passion fruit, but I'm burying the lead here. I'm skipping past the most important and most noticeable and recognizable feature, and that is lychee fruit. That is such a keen comparison. Gewürztraminer smells like lychee fruit. It almost always smells like lychee fruit. And if you don't know what the smell of lychee fruit is like, you'd want to go to the grocery store and you want to buy a can. You want to buy canned, tinned lychee fruit in syrup. You crack that open and it has this incredible smell to it. This incredible, wonderful aroma that is sweet and a little bit floral and very intriguing and very unique. There is a distinct nature to this smell of lychee fruit, and that's why Gewürztraminer is so fun, because it taps into that smell in such an acute way that you really just you can't replicate it in any other wine. So this right here, you have these aromas of lychee. You have rose coming in there. There's definitely that floral aspect to it. Something a little bit honeyed. There's a little kind of element of sweetness, but also something a little bit waxy. There's a little bit of a paraffin, and that's some of what you get from the age. Brand new, fresh Gewürztraminer is going to smell fresh. It's going to smell bright. It's going to smell juicy. It's going to smell fruit forward. But then when you age it a little bit, you start to get more of this dried fruit character, and you get a little bit of this kind of layered waxiness, which is, again, really, really fun to experience. Now, when I say dried fruit, the thing that immediately comes to mind for me is dried mango. Who doesn't love dried mango? It's absolutely fantastic. And this smells to me like opening a bag of dried mango. All right. So let's go ahead. Let's have a taste here. Now, of course, the first taste you take, I have to say this every single time, the first taste that you take is just a primer coat. You take a sip, and it covers your mouth, and it gets you ready. It sets you up. You are not going to get the full experience of the wine. You're not going to appreciate really the flavor, but you are going to get ready. You're going to get prepared. This is you doing your legwork. Something that you can get from that first taste is texture, and also an illustration of the balance between sweetness and acid. Now, another reason why we wanted to use the Bordertown Gewürztraminer for this particular tasting is because it strikes a really nice balance between sweetness and acidity. Gewürztraminer is not an acidic grape. It's relatively low acid, and it's also a very fussy grape. It's actually very particular in the type of soil that you plant it in and the conditions that it's grown in. And if you grow it in really hot conditions, it can suffer because the pH levels rise, the sweetness rises, and the acid plunges, and you wind up getting something that is flabby and just a little bit almost bland. This is not that. Even though this is from 2015, which was a hot season, The team at Bordertown managed to pull together a wine that has just enough zip to it, just enough zest on the back right there, that it avoids the pitfalls of being a heavy-handed, blunt wine. There is a little bit of sweetness, but it's only about 13 grams of sugar. Gewürztraminer absolutely has the potential to be an overly sweet wine. Some people do not like Gewürztraminer because they associate it with sweetness. They try the Gewürz. They think that every Gewürz is going to be overly sweet, but this right here, 13 grams of sugar, that is firmly within the category of off-dry. But, and I think I've said this before, I don't like sweet wines. This is very appealing. I'll remind you again that I only taste wines on this that I like. See, it's really pleasant. It's round on the palate. It made my voice crack for a second there. It's round on the palate. It has a warm, rich mouthfeel without relying on oak. A Chardonnay can have a warm, rich mouthfeel based on the oaking process. But this is a wine that does it based on kind of the natural oiliness of the grape. There's a bit of texture, a bit of oil that comes from the extraction. And you wind up getting something that is round, that is plump, that is really, really, really attractive. And I think I saw it, see it written in the comments right there, but it is a great pairing with spicy food. There's a natural synchronicity there between the hint of sweetness and sort of the softness of the palate. A little bit of spice and a little bit of sweetness, they go beautifully together. And actually, the Bordertown team themselves, they point out that it's great with spicy food. It's fortunate that the owners of Bordertown are East Indian in heritage. So again, there's a nice pairing component there. You think Indian food and this Gewürztraminer. Honestly, all of their white wines are perfectly suited to Indian cuisine. But then they also suggest try it with fruit salad, right? When we talk about food and wine pairings, you basically have two different options. You either go for contrast, you take sweetness and you put it with spicy. The sweetness cuts down the spiciness, the spiciness cuts down the sweetness. But then you can also go with complementary. When you take this Gewürztraminer and you pair it together with fruit salad, it highlights and enhances some of the tones of the fruit right there, and the fruit helps bring out the fruitiness of this wine. So, again, beautiful, wonderful wine. And what's more, $20. Cheap. Let me just put it up on the board right here. You've got Bordertown Gewürztraminer. This one was 2015. $20 a bottle, which is a fantastic price. I'm hoping that with my new camera, you'll be able to see the whiteboard a little bit better. Cross fingers. All right, I just realized that I don't have a spittoon, so give me 1 second. I have a promotional merchandise tie-in right here in relation to the next wine that I'm about to try, because this is going to be my spittoon for today. Since I am in Parksville, I do have to drive home, so I'm not going to be drinking all of this wine. This is my NK'MIP Cellars water bottle using the old logo that I'm sure they absolutely hate me showing on camera, because when you change your logo as a winery, you're supposed to totally disavow any existence of previous logos. But here's my water bottle that I got when I worked at NK'MIP Cellars, and I'm just going to go ahead and pour some wine into that water right there. I said that I wasn't going to be drinking before I drive home. Didn't say anything about drinking on the drive home. That's not funny. Bad joke. Don't drink and drive. anyways, perfect tie-in with my water bottle there, because the next wine that I'm going to talk about is, as I said, an old favorite of mine, the NK'MIP Cellars NK'MIP Riesling. This is 2019. This is brand new. In the same way that the Bordertown Gewürtztraminer is brand new, coming out right now as we speak, so too the Riesling at NK'MIP just hit the shelves, and this is the wine that made me like Riesling. A little bit of history. I went to the Okanagan 10 years ago as a high school teacher. There's no children in the Okanagan, so I wound up having to sell wine. I was hired by one Jennifer Bussman, who just so happens to be the director of the Oliver Soyuz Winery Association now. Well, funny coincidence. And she hired me to work at NK'MIP. I knew absolutely nothing about wine, but the wine was delicious. So it was a nice introduction. It was a great place to work. I was there for 5 years, and while I was there, this was my favorite wine of the bunch. Back then, it went under a different name, and they actually took a bit of a gap year. They took a couple of years where they didn't produce single varietal Riesling, much to everybody's chagrin, because it was a beautiful wine. And then finally, just to please the crowds, they brought back the Riesling under the NK'MIP line. The thing that makes the NK'MIP Cellars Riesling so beautiful is that it combines a little bit of sweetness with a keen, crisp, clean acidity. Now, NK'MIP Cellars, where is it? It's in a Soyuz. I suppose I should talk a little bit about the name first, actually, before we tell you more, but it's on the east side of a Soyuz. On the east side of a Soyuz lake, you go over the bridge, you start to head up towards Anarchist Mountain, and you pull off to the side. NK'MIP Cellars, Moon Cursor, and Adega are three wineries. Lakeside as well. All four of those wineries are just right there, tucked into a little corner as you're leaving town. But even though NK'MIP has a beautiful site right down in the hottest part of, basically of Canada in terms of growing grapes, right there in a Soyuz, they don't actually grow this Riesling right there. This Riesling is grown just north, immediately sort of northeast of Oliver on NK'MIP vineyards. Now, this is important to point out that NK'MIP Cellars, and that is how you say it. You say NK'MIP. Even though it is spelled NK''MIP, it's not NK'MIP, it's NK'MIP. It is the first Aboriginal owned and operated winery in all of North America. It started up in 2002 by the Osoyoos Indian Band, and they were using grapes that they were already growing on their land. The Osoyoos Indian Band has tens of thousands of acres of land on the east side of the valley between Oliver and Osoyoos. And decades ago, a former chief of the band, Sam Baptiste, planted a vineyard and started cultivating grapes in a place where nobody else had done it before, and he now has the pleasure of still managing, decades later, one of the finest vineyards in the entire South Okanagan, or nay, the entire Okanagan itself, and that's where this Riesling comes from. This is the same Riesling that is also used for several products that are produced by NK'MIP. It is used in their single varietal Riesling here. It is used in their Dreamcatcher white blend, and it is used in their award-winning, their absolutely stellar NK'MIP Riesling Ice Wine, which was the first wine in all of Canada to receive a perfect 100-point score by John Schreiner, the critic. So let's not tempt me any longer here. Now, if you were me, you would be able to see that this is a much clearer wine. This has much less pigment to it than the Gewürztraminer. Riesling tends to be a very clean-skinned grape. And so it tends to be that when you're producing Riesling, you get very little color extraction, and so your Riesling can be crystal clear. This is a very, very light wine. Now, of course, this is not the way to look at color by holding it up high. It's always going to look a little bit darker. What you want to do is you want to find something white, and you want to tilt the wine and look down on the wine with the white underneath it. That's going to give you a much more accurate impression of the color. You're going to see there is a little bit of pigment, but not as much as the Gewürztraminer. I've said some other words that maybe are a little bit confusing. NK'MIP, yes. Quamquamt. The two words that precede the name of this wine on the bottle. This is their premium line. This is the name of the NK'MIP Cellars premium line of wine. They have two lines of wine, three lines actually. They have the Winemakers series, they have the Quamquamt series, and then they have their Marime series. And Quamquamt means, in the local First Nations language, it means achieving excellence. And so that was always the name of their premium line of wine, using First Nations grown grapes, produced in a First Nations winery, and now in recent years produced by a First Nations winemaker. Justin Hall is one of the winemaking team at NK'MIP. He was an assistant winemaker for many years. He was just recently promoted to full winemaker, and he takes care of the white wine portfolio. His counterpart is Randy Picton, who's an old tree planter, and he takes care of the red wine component. And Aaron is there too. And so anyways, the Riesling right here, beautiful wine made by lovely people. And again, you see why it's aromatic. Bright, crisp. You immediately get this sort of vitality coming from the wine. This also has a little bit of sweetness to it. This is about, I think it's 12 grams. Let me check my, no, 8. This is 8 grams of sweetness, 8 grams of sugar per liter. Again, that's the reference that we use. How many grams are in a liter of wine? So the Gewürtztraminer from Bordertown there, that was 13 grams in a liter of wine, which again, when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, is actually a very small amount of sweetness considering this is made out of grape juice. But the Riesling right here, down at 8, which is just narrowly above what you would consider dry. Dry tends to be sort of 6 or 7 grams maximum and under, and then off dry kind of starts right around this level, about 8 grams. However, this has much higher acid, and so really dryness is an imprecise science because it's based on the overall perception. I would call this a dry wine because it has enough acid to cut into that sweetness. You get lots and lots of orchard fruit. You get green apple. You get yellow apple. It's not quite that tart Granny Smith. There's just enough sweetness to keep it away from that tart side of things. That's a place that Riesling always strays towards. But right here, you're getting a lot of the honeyed characteristics. You're getting impressions of sweetness. Yes, wonderful. Ah, so good. See, right away that just makes me grin because this has, like I said, it has some acid. The numbers. Let me just check my notes. I'm operating off of somewhat outdated tasting notes, so the technical specs might be a little bit different, but roughly we're looking at about 9 points of total acidity, which is high. Average level of total acidity is between kind of 4 and 7. That's pretty typical range that you see in all of our Soyuz wine country in a lot of wines. And so when you push up to 8, you're getting a high acid. And when you hit 9 like this, good grief, that's beautiful. It's refreshing, it's crisp, and it's exactly why you have 8 grams of sugar in there, because that helps balance it. Think about it like making lemonade. I use this analogy all the time. When you're making Riesling, think about it like making lemonade. You don't just have straight lemons. You have to have some sugar in there to balance it. But the amount of sugar that you put in, that is totally on you. And so NK'MIP, they like to make their Riesling pretty dry. They like to balance that acid by using a little tiny bit of sweetness, but not too much. And so you get these beautiful citrus tones. You get lemon, you get lime, you get maybe a little hint of grapefruit. Mostly it's lime, I would say. And you get apple. Like I said, on the nose, there's this impression there's this sort of secret sweetness there that gives you that little kind of honeyed tone, leads you more towards yellow apple, almost a little bit of that baked apple, just the tiniest touch. But on the palate, you get Granny Smith. You get beautiful green apple, and it is just delicious. These are produced from 42-year-old vines on NK'MIP vineyards, which is just, it's so impressive for the Okanagan, which is such a young industry in terms of our wine producing heritage. And so when you have wines that are coming from vines that are over 30 years, 40, 42 here, that is really saying something. And the quality of the wine really does come from the grapes. Now, there is something to talk about with Riesling that some people are a little bit iffy about, but I love. This is still a little bit too young to really develop it, but it's a compound that's called TDH, and we say TDH because we don't want to say trimethyl dihydronaphthalene, which is far too long and complicated for most people. Even I have to write it down. Trimethyl dihydronaphthalene. And trimethyl dihydronaphthalene, there you see, I did it without my notes. Trimethyl dihydronaphthalene, this is a aroma compound that appears in a few different types of grapes, but in particular Riesling. And it's what makes the wine sometimes smell like petrol. Petrol is the specific tasting note that we use for it, but it's kind of diesel fuel. Sometimes it smells almost like kerosene or like gasoline or new plastic. Sometimes there's that kind of rubbery, plasticky tone to it. This is something really fascinating because unlike most aroma compounds that appear in wines, trimethyl dihydronaphthalene comes on over time. So this is brand new Riesling, 2019, but if we let this sit for a year, 2 years, 3 years, we're going to start to see that trimethyl dihydronaphthalene, let's just call it TDH for simplicity, we're going to start to see the TDH come out, and it's going to start to smell more and more like petrol, which is a little bit off-putting for some people, particularly if they're not expecting it. If you try a Riesling from, say, 2015 or 2016, and you suddenly get this waft of gas canister, it can be really shocking, but if you know you're looking for it, then it's actually really delightful. I mean, who doesn't like the smell of gasoline? But it's not socially acceptable to smell gasoline. It is socially acceptable to smell this. So there is the NK'MIP series Riesling from NK'MIP Cellars. I'm going to put it on the board right here. This is $24. And this is available many different locations, but always the best way to buy your wine is to get it directly from the winery itself. That is the best way to support your favorite wineries. And they are also offering free shipping, just like Bordertown. Free shipping online on orders of 6 bottles or more. NK'MIP Riesling, 2019, $24. An absolute steal for the wine that basically made me like Riesling. In fact, you could argue the wine that made me like wine. NK'MIP being the first property that I worked at, my first winery really. And this was the wine, and it continues to be the wine. And look at that. I'm even going to pour it into the NK'MIP water bottle. Okay. So good. All right. Let's talk about the third and final wine of the night. This is from a very exciting new property. I'll give you a little spoiler here. I have been making a podcast for Oliver Soy's Wine Country, and before I left the Okanagan last month, I went around and I interviewed a bunch of winemakers. And I talked with different winemakers. I recorded some interviews that were going to be airing over the next month or two. And I asked each one of these winemakers, what wine do you like? If you go to somebody else's winery, what is impressing you, what is exciting you, what wines do you like to try? And every winemaker that I talked to, they all said the exact same thing. It was actually really funny. I expected a lot more variety. And sure, they said, oh yeah, I like this, or I like that, or I like this other one. But every one of them mentioned by name Phantom Creek Estates. Every one of the winemakers I interviewed said, this stuff is really interesting and really good. Phantom Creek is a brand new winery that is really in its very first season. They were doing some sort of soft touring last year, but really this spring was their official launch. They did a big virtual launch because, of course, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, which is why I'm on a camera instead of right in your living room right now. And so Phantom Creek is brand new, but it's also been one of the most hotly anticipated wineries. Hey, you can't even see it, but this is an NK'MIP corkscrew. This is my corkscrew that I use, and it's from NK'MIP Cellars. Look at all this stuff. I can't remember if Jennifer hated these corkscrews or loved these ones. I think she hated these. Anyways, I love it. Phantom Creek, brand new winery. Why has it been so hotly anticipated? Well, for many reasons. It is a winery that is starting up with a tremendous amount of heritage baked into the cake, because they are setting up on kind of this historic Phantom Creek vineyard. You see, back in the 1970s, there was a historic project, the Becker Project, which was a kind of experimental vineyard project to see what grapes would grow in the Okanagan. And it was the project that basically put the idea that you could grow Bordeaux grapes, that is to say, things like Merlot, things like Cab Sauv, Cab Franc. The idea that you could grow those grapes in the Okanagan was basically unprecedented before this trial vineyard, the Becker Vineyard. A few years later, well, actually about 20 years later almost, a fellow named Dick Cleve, who is known as kind of the father of Okanagan viticulture, Dick Cleve came along and he planted a proper vineyard surrounding this Becker plot. And the wines that were grown on Mr. Dick Cleve's vineyard there, 3 times in the last couple of decades have wound up being ranked as the #1 red wine in all of Canada. So this is a vineyard that was based on sort of a historic experiment, laid the ground for the growth of some of the oldest Bordeaux red wines in BC, and has since that time been producing incredibly high caliber fruit that's been used to repeatedly make some of the best red wine in Canada. Then in 2015, 16, let me just check my notes here, 16. Then in 2016, it was basically branded as Phantom Creek by the, by the Bai family, which is a family coming in from Vancouver, originally from China, and Mr. Bai, the owner here, Richter Bai, he's basically stated that this is to be kind of a legacy project for his entire family, an inheritance for his children, that this is to be a family business. And in fact, the logo, this kind of swirl right there, that is basically the signature of the Bai family, effectively. So there's a good sense of family and integration there in the very foundation of it. But as well, they have some really cool concepts behind what they're doing. Phantom Creek has been basically putting forward the process to convert vast tracts of vineyard into organic and biodynamic processes. They have the intention of being a large production winery that does everything organic and biodynamic, which is almost unprecedented in terms of the scale that they are trying to do. When I lived in Osoyoos, I actually lived right next door to one of their vineyard managers, and I chatted with him, and he said that it's an incredible team, that they were so incredibly supportive of their staff. They were a great team to work for, and the work that they were doing to make all of their vineyards organic and sustainable. He said it was really admirable. And this is an old hand at vineyard operation, my neighbor, and so he knew what he was talking about, and he was impressed. And just the fact that he was impressed made me impressed. But as well, on the winemaking team, they've really gone above and beyond. They have some stellar winemakers coming in from all over. They've got winemakers from New Zealand, they've got winemakers from California, but as well, they managed to bag Olivier Humbrecht, who is this superstar winemaker from the Alsace region of France. I've mentioned that area a couple times because it's basically where you see Riesling and where you see Gewürtztraminer coming out of primarily in the world. And Olivier Humbrecht has one of the best regarded biodynamic wineries in all of France. And they managed to get him to come over here as a consulting winemaker, and he said that this is a perfect site to do Riesling and Pinot Gris, and he said, well, if you can't do biodynamic and organic growing in the Okanagan, where can you do it? So he's consulting in the winemaking, and that's something that has a lot of people really excited. You have this stellar, internationally acclaimed winemaker coming in at a winery that is really pulling out all the stops in terms of its vineyard and also its facility. I mean, once again, I'm burying the lead here. I'm talking about all the things they're doing in the vineyard and the winemaking, but most people in the Okanagan, at least, have known about Phantom Creek for years and years as that gigantic winery that's being built on the hillside. Everybody's been talking about how much money has been going into it and how big it's going to be and how impressive it's going to be. And it's true that it is absolutely world class. You can now go for a visit. They are now officially open, their tasting bar. And when you go, you can see they have this auditorium, this 500-seat auditorium that they're going to do live music events at. They're setting up their restaurants. They're planning to have lounges. They're planning to have this incredible facility. And when you go for a tasting, you have to book by appointment. There's no walk-ins. You have to go by appointment only. And you do a seated tasting necessarily. There's no standing at the tasting bar, and you have the option to do a 90-minute tour around the facility and do your tasting while you sort of do the entire experience. So it is really coming in at such a high level that it's just something else entirely. It really is worth a look. And here's the wine. This is 2017 Riesling. And this has been done in a way that's a little bit different. I told you that the NK'MIP Cellars Riesling is fairly dry, that they like to go fairly low sweetness and then balance that against the acid. Well, the Phantom Creek Riesling right here is a little bit lower acid, just a little bit lower acid, a little higher pH, which kind of balances off the acid, but it is also much, much drier. The sweetness on this, it's only a couple of grams. Compared to 8 grams of sweetness in the NK'MIP, this one's only 2 or 3. Let me just look at my notes here once again. 3.8, almost 4. Point is, it's half as much in terms of sweetness, which is a very dry Riesling. And one of the ways that they have balanced the acid to make sure that it's not too aggressive is they've used a little bit of oak, which is really not something that you tend to see with Riesling. Now, I say a little bit. Riesling is a wine that has opinions. And that means that when you put Riesling into an oak barrel, you have two conflicting sets of opinions, and they do not always mesh. There's a very good reason why you don't often see 100% oaked Riesling. It's a weird combo. But what they've done right here is they've gone 10 months in stainless steel for 93% of the wine, and they've gone 7% of the wine in neutral French oak barrels. Neutral barrels being aged barrels, not overly flavorful, in fact, very little flavor to them, if any at all. And really, they're putting the wine into those barrels to soften it. A little bit of oak treatment can help oxidize a wine. It can help sort of break it down, it can help round it out, and it can add just a little bit of tannin, which then gets broken down by the oxygen to reinforce the mid-palate of the wine. to just add a little bit of texture. All these things can also help mitigate the impression of acidity. So rather than using sweetness, they have done a little bit of oaking to help balance it in a slightly different way. You get a little bit more apricot on this. That's interesting. It's really fun to try two different Rieslings and see the way that they come across in different ways. This is just so wonderfully complex. There are some amazing layers here. You don't just get one thing, which I hope that by now, if you've been watching every one of these live stream tastings, I hope you understand that sometimes I try a wine and then I just kind of go, whew, wow. And it's because when you have a wine that has a lot of complexity to it, it can be a little bit trickier to just say, oh yeah, tastes like grapefruit, tastes like lime. There is a nuance to it that takes contemplation. This is a wine that is really worth sitting and enjoying and thinking about. This is not something you drink while you are distracted. This is something that you drink while you are focusing on it, because that balance of acid, little hint of sweetness, and the oak profile is enough to make this really it's really novel. It's fantastic. The acid is there, you pick it up at the back, but on the mid palate, it's round, it's warm, it's textured. I mean, in some ways it reminds you of the Gewürtztraminer from Bordertown in terms of the mouthfeel, but it's coming through in a very different way. There's some really fantastic nuance here. I should also point out that this was, in addition to being biodynamic, whatnot in terms of the viticulture, it was also fermented using indigenous yeast. Usually when we're making wine, we order yeast. We order a specific yeast that comes out of a catalog, and it's engineered and designed to elicit a certain effect from your wine. But it's a big deal in France, particularly in biodynamic vineyards like the one that Humbrecht operates, to use things like natural yeast. And so this is the yeast that is naturally occurring within your own vineyard. And so what they've done is they've captured the indigenous yeast from their own vineyard, and they've fermented it using this wild yeast. And so there's it's very hard to describe to you how the wine tastes different because of that, but it is inherently and philosophically something that gives an incredible amount of authenticity to the wine itself. If you're just tuning in, I'm just trying the Phantom Creek Riesling. This is 2017. I've gone through the Bordertown Gewürtztraminer and the NK'MIP Riesling, and I'm just kind of smelling it and tasting it and going, wow, at the camera. So I hope you enjoy that. Also a reminder that we are at beautiful Tainamara Resort in Parksville, and it's real nice here. It's a lot nicer than my tool shed. So this wine is also giving only just the faintest hints of petrol. You're really not seeing very much because, again, it is fairly young. That TDH, that trimethyl dihydro, I've forgotten it. Trimethyl dihydronaphthalene. The naphthalene's the tough part. The trimethyl dihydronaphthalene, that aroma compound tends to come out more in hotter climates. When you have a lot of sun, when you really bake your grapes, that's what encourages it to emerge in Riesling. And then you have to lay them down in the bottle. You have to give them some age. So this was grown in a slightly cooler climate than what we would typically see down here in Oliver Soy's wine country. And because it was just a little bit cooler and because it's still relatively young, not really popping with that petrol yet, but I would anticipate that if you give it a couple of years, that we'll see some really amazing development. Riesling is, in fact, one of the best wines for long aging and long-term development. Out of all the whites, it has the fortitude, it has the natural acidity that keeps it alive in the bottle for a much longer time. So let's throw this on the board here. Phantom Creek. Riesling 2017. And this is coming in a little more expensive. This is $30. All of the Phantom Creek wines are coming in at a slightly higher premium, but when you understand the level of attention that's going into the vineyards, like I said, converting hundreds of acres of vineyard into purely organic and biodynamic operation methods, and then bringing in this sort of international cast, this super group, the traveling Wilburys of winemakers, pretty much to create these wines and make these wines, it's absolutely worth the money. The regular lineup that they have available for the public ranges anywhere from $30 to about $55. That's their typical lineup, Phantom Creek. And if you join the wine club, if you join their wine club, you get access to a lot of exclusives, which I think is a great way to entice people into joining a wine club. That's my personal sales expertise coming into play there. You offer exclusives, and Phantom Creek has done a great job with that. They've offered a half dozen exclusive wines that you can only get if you join their wine club, and they range up to and including $125 for some incredible world-class wines. So another really stellar winery that's quite new. It's really exciting doing these tastings, this tasting series, because we get to talk about a bunch of new wineries. We get to talk about wineries that are coming out right now, coming out strong with some really interesting offerings and changing the immediate face of what all Vernasoyas look like. But we also get to put them next to some of these veterans of the industry that the entire area couldn't survive without. You've got the relatively new, like Bordertown, you have the brand new, like Phantom Creek, and then you have the sort of pioneers, like NK'MIP, starting up in 2002 down in Osoyoos. Not a lot of wineries down in that end of the valley. And so really, really fantastic to see. Well, everybody, I'm gonna wrap things up right here because I just want to drink this wine. And so I want to thank everybody for watching. We are doing this series of live stream tastings every second week, and so the next one you will see 2 weeks again from now. I believe I'll be back again at NK'MIP Resort because I don't think that I disrupted their operations too much by being here, so hopefully they invite me back. And we'll be talking about Syrah at that time, so if you were a little bit unimpressed that we talked about nothing but white wines today, well, number one, you need to be more comfortable with your wine tasting sensitivities, and number two, don't worry, we've got pure reds coming up for you 2 weeks from now. We'll have the Syrah coming up 2 weeks from now on whatever day that is. I don't remember offhand. I've written it in the comments down below. But thank you, everybody, and thank you again to both Bordertown, not both, more than two, Bordertown, NK'MIP Cellars, and Phantom Creek for providing these wines. Thank you to NK'MIP. Talk about biodynamic. They won a couple years back the Vancouver Island EcoStar Award for their kind of environmentalism right here. They did $6 million in renovations to the resort and spa, installing everything from soy-based insulation to entirely water-based paints on the walls. It's incredible. They're actually the only resort in all of Vancouver Island that uses renewable gas as one of their fuel sources here. So really, really impressive business, and they've got good pizza, and it's 2-for-1 takeout. So that's probably what I'm going to do for dinner tonight. So thank you all for joining us, and chin chin. Now I've got to do a big walk over to the laptop. So let's pretend that I'm finished, and now you get to watch as I walk over to the laptop. So.